I loved one episode of American Idol. It's Idol Gives Back. And Simon Cowell goes into a village in Africa, and he goes into a hut where a woman has 14 children, 8 of which are children from parents who died of AIDS. And Simon Cowell walks into this hut, and in front of the TV camera he says, "I never realized this existed." Then he says, "This is not right. It's not right." That's good, Simon. Very good. Now I speak at the University of Arizona. Student steps out of the crowd and says, "No, I don't buy your Jesus." I say, "Fine, what's the purpose of your life?" And he says, "Oh, that's simple, Cliff. The purpose of my life is to have good sex, drink good beer, and listen to George Carlin." Ow. And I said, "Fine. Now let me ask you something. In light of the fact that 1/3 of the human population is starving to death tonight, where do you get off saying the purpose of life is to have good sex, good beer, and listen to George Carlin? Don't you think that's a little trivial? Don't you think that's a tad bit superficial?" See, Jesus Christ makes a ton of sense when you think about it, when Christ says the purpose of life is to love and worship God and to love and serve people. A ton of sense. Watch out for superficial thinking where you trivialize yourself and you trivialize other human beings who have innate value, for they too are created in the image and likeness of God.
Where is justice? What is mercy? Where's the sacred and the holy? In this world full of choices, where's the truth in all the voices? Give me an answer. Don't waste my time. Tell it to me straight. The truth is getting hard to find. I have objections to what I've learned. I have questions and concerns. Give me an answer.
Yeah, I thought God loved everyone. He wouldn't just throw people in the fire forever. It doesn't sound very sweet and nice.
How is it just to put a person who is a good person by society standards and a person who has killed many people in the same boat? Like, why, if a God exists, why would he do that?
Doesn't Jesus say he forgives everyone if you accept him anyways? I can do whatever the I want, and Jesus is gonna forgive me for everything. Like,
No, God only forgives us when we ask him for forgiveness. We have to ask him for forgiveness. In humility, we have to ask him to forgive us. Now, think about this. If I steal $500 from this guy, and he says, "Cliff, you stole $500 from me." And I say, "Well, here's $250. He says, "Wait a second, Cliff. You stole $500. You owe me more than $250. And I say, "Bug off. I think I owe you $250, so here's the $250. See, the problem with that is, it's his $500 that I stole. And for me to think that I just can give him $250 and that's justice is wrong.
you should give him interest.
Okay? Well, according to Christ, it's God who I've sinned against. And it is God who defines what I owe him. And according to God, when I sin, what I owe him is my life. The wages of sin is death.
God's a selfish.
What does he owe
Why
me
is
when
God
I
a
get
selfish
cancer?
person?
I think God should give me something nice if I get cancer. He's the one who gave me it. You know, like, if I have to give God all this when I get cancer or HIV or some disease, doesn't God owe me something?
No, God doesn't owe us anything. God gave us the gift of life and we messed it up. So God has been very generous. God gave his only son, Christ, to bleed and die on a cross. So, I mean, God has given himself for us. Now, the question is, how are we going to respond to God's grace, to his generosity? That's the question. How are you going to respond to God's love, to his generosity? How am I going to respond to God's love and God's generosity? That's the issue. Think carefully. Now, why do you say that God is such a horrible being? Sir, what's your point? Why do you think God is such a horrible being?
Because he's jealous and selfish.
Jealous?
Yeah. No gods before me. I mean, why does it matter to him? He's an omnipotent being. It has no effect on him whatsoever.
Good.
What we do.
Good.
Why does he care?
Very good. Okay, I have 3 sons. If one of my 3 sons is buying into drug addiction, and he goes out on the street corner and meets with a drug dealer, if I'm not jealous for my son's allegiance, there's something wrong with my love. If I walk into my house and my wife is in the arms of another man and I experience no jealousy, then I don't understand what love is.
You don't have 6 billion sons.
Yeah, but when we talk about God's jealousy, we're talking about his love, which is committed to us. And because his love is committed to us, when he watches us go after idols that lead to destruction, he is jealous.
Yes, he's so committed to us that he gives cancer to good people.
God doesn't give cancer to good people.
Really?
Really?
Who gives cancer to good people then?
You and I live in a cursed, messed up world, just in case you haven't noticed.
Wasn't Jesus supposed to?
And there's a
change
lot
that
of
to
havoc and a lot of
Messiah?
chaos. And when you read the Bible, you bump into Genesis chapter 3. And in Genesis chapter 3, we read about a fall. And it's a big fall. It's not a question of someone stubbing their toe. Adam and Eve commit cosmic treason against God. There's a major fall. And that's where the earth is messed up. What's the point of the book of Job? Did Job sin? Is that why he suffered? No. Job suffered because he was born into a cursed, unfair world.
Job suffered because God had a bet with Satan.
Yes, Satan obviously challenged the integrity of Job's faith, correct.
So God has a gambling problem.
No, it's an issue of free will. It's an issue of free will. And obviously Satan's point was, the only reason Job has faith in you is because he knows who butters his bread. And his faith is just based on you unloading the goody-goodies on him. And once you take the goody-goodies away, he'll curse you to your face.
But we're missing the point that God felt he had to prove himself to Satan. Why did he feel he needed to prove himself to Satan?
God didn't have to prove himself to Satan.
He didn't have to, but he felt he needed to.
No,
and
he
did
did
it.
not. The book of Job is not about God proving anything. The book of Job is a challenge of, is Job's faith based on having the goody-goodies in life delivered on a silver platter, or is Job's faith based on the character of God being good in spite of the circumstances of life? And when the circumstances of life turn unfair and cruel, Job's faith is so magnificent because his faith is not based on the circumstances of life, it's based on the character of God. And that's incredible.
I mean, you're saying every other religion's wrong. Who are you to say that?
I am saying that Jesus Christ is reliable. And you're right, Jesus Christ contradicts Buddha, Muhammad, the avatars of Hinduism. The law of non-contradiction applies. A and non-A cannot be both equally right in the same way at the same time.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, the question is, does the evidence support Jesus Christ as being reliable, or Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, or Muhammad, or Shirley MacLaine, or whoever you're seriously considering?
I mean, the evidence I've seen, no, and no. To answer all those questions.
Well, how in light of the fact that Jesus lived a sinless life, he taught amazing ethical teachings. Robert Cole, psychology professor at Harvard University, points out, all the writings on ethics over the past 2,000 years are simply footnotes to the Sermon on the Mount. When you read the Sermon on the Mount, it's obviously the teachings of an ethical genius. Thirdly, as Jesus dies on a cross, instead of cursing his enemies the way I would have, he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then fourthly, 3 days after he dies, he physically, bodily rises from the dead, and over a period of 40 days appears to over 500 people who see him risen from the dead. The evidence is you can trust Christ because he's credible.
Okay, guess what, man? My grandpa died and resurrected 50 years ago. And he talked to 50 people. Do you believe me? No, you think I'm crazy.
I don't think you're crazy. I'm going to ask you, what's the evidence that your grandpa really rose from the dead 50 years ago?
I have a book here.
Well, give me the evidence that your grandpa rose from the dead, and I'll look at the evidence.
I have a book. You want the book?
I thought you guys were at a very fine institution of higher learning, where you're being taught. Demand evidence before you believe. You've got to look for the evidence.